All right, hello again, everybody. Welcome to our next lesson here. This is Transformation and Trouble in the United States. This is for our unit, or the unit Democracy and Progress. Please take a moment here to look over the objectives and standards. And our desired result: how did the United States transform during the 1800s? Growth after independence. Americans looked to expand settlements following their independence from Great Britain in 1783. The United States gradually began to grow west of the Mississippi River. Government also helped to expand and grow the new country. Expanding territory. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson, you can see his picture in the top there, or on the top there, purchased the Louisiana Territory from France, which doubled the size of the country. If you look at the bottom picture there, you'll see in the dark green color the Louisiana Purchase and how it kind of expanded the country. Spain gave Florida to the United States in 1819. And in 1846, Great Britain gave part of the Oregon Territory. In 1846, Great Britain gave part of the Oregon Territory to the United States. Sorry about that. Moving west. Some Americans believed in manifest destiny, the idea that the United States had a right to rule over all of North America. They wanted to control from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Many government leaders agreed and put policies in place to achieve this. Now, removal of Native Americans. 1830, the Indian Removal Act. Government officials could legally force Native Americans living in the East to move west. Now, some tribes tried to fight the law, but lost. Many had to move westward on what would become known as the Trail of Tears, and there were many that died along the way. As you probably saw about some of the information about the Trail of Tears, in the video that you saw earlier in the beginning part of the assignment and lesson here. Trouble in Texas. Mexico allowed Americans to move into the territory of Texas. Americans quickly became upset with the way Mexico ruled. 1836, Texas revolted and won independence. 1845, the United States annexed or took control of Texas. Annex basically means taking control of something for yourself. War with Mexico. Mexico saw the annexation of Texas as an act of war. 1846-1848, the Mexican-American War. Mexico finally surrendered and gave up territory to the United States. And this picture, or this map here, shows you what Mexico surrendered following the Mexican-American War. So places we refer to today as California, Nevada, Utah, pieces of Arizona, pieces of New Mexico, and pieces of Colorado, and even up top here a little bit, pieces of Wyoming. So this was some of the land and territory that we gained as a result of the Mexican-American War. Different cultures. While many Americans agreed with expansion, the North and the South were completely different in other areas. Factory and industry controlled the North, while the South was based on agriculture and farming. In the North, the economy was worked by freed laborers, while slavery existed in the South. A crisis begins. Many Northerners saw slavery as wrong and wanted to abolish it. Southerners saw it as necessary for their economy, and wanted to expand it. Many Southern states believed they had entered the United States on their own, and they could leave on their own. Northern states believed that the country needed to stay together as the Union. So you begin to see this difference in opinion about slavery and other issues, which is going to eventually lead to more trouble down the road for the United States. A new leader and new problems. 1860, Republican Abraham Lincoln was elected president. You're probably familiar with his name and maybe his picture as well. The Bottom left-hand picture here, that's Abraham Lincoln in 1860, but you might recognize him more so from the right-hand side picture here on the bottom with his beard. So the picture on the left-hand side is a picture taken by Alexander Hessler, who is up top here. I put his picture just for reference. But the bottom picture is what Lincoln looked like in 1860, and then the right-hand picture is what we're all more familiar with, maybe, in terms of a picture of Abraham Lincoln with his beard in 1865. Now, many Southerners were furious because Lincoln had promised to stop the spread of slavery, so Southern states began to secede, which was withdraw from the Union, and they became the Confederate States of America. So this is a map here that shows you kind of how the country was divided as the southern states decided to leave the Union. The gray states there, that's what becomes known as the Confederate States of America. The light blue states, they are continuing to be part of the United States of America, or the Union. The gray states will be called the Confederacy. The light blue states will be called the Union. The greenish color states, they're what we consider border states, which really kind of just, you know, they were very divided in terms of what side to support. But they were, you know, kind of keeping the division there between the area. And then the reddish brown color, that's the Western territories that weren't really states yet. But again, you can see how the country was divided as we go into the Civil War here. Okay, so Civil War. In 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on the Federal troops stationed at Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. Lincoln ordered U.S. troops to bring the southern states back into the Union, and with that, the U.S. Civil War began. 4 years later, in 1865, a very bloody and destructive 4 years later, in 1865, the Confederate States of America surrendered. Now, freedom and Reconstruction. Prior to the end of the war, in 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and this declared slaves in the Confederate States free. Eventually, Congress passed amendments or changes to the Constitution that abolished slavery and gave former slaves citizenship and the right to vote. Following the war, Union forces stayed in the South to enforce laws, and this is known as Reconstruction. When these troops left, many southern states passed laws to restrict the voting rights of African Americans. They also encouraged segregation, which is separation of African Americans and whites. African Americans faced violence and discrimination in the South and sometimes the North as well. Okay, so our closure. How did the United States transform during the 1800s? Think about how the United States expanded. Think about the trouble and issue of the U.S. Civil War, and think about some of the changes that come about because of that, such as the Emancipation Proclamation and Reconstruction and things like that, and that'll help you answer your questions. Please try your best in the questions that follow and let me know of any questions or concerns, and I hope to talk to you all again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.